What is up, and welcome back to Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. As always, I am your host, Brandon Silvers. First show in a bit as I was dealing with some stuff, so thank you for your patience. Also, first show of the new year, so let's make it a good one and see if we can fix the NBA. Make sure to start your year off right by subscribing if you haven't already. Let's get into it. All right, we've seen all the discourse on the state of the NBA these days, specifically that it's no longer popular. There are several examples of why this is true that come up over and over again. What we're going to do is look at this quote unquote proof, figure out whether or not it's accurate, whether or not they're actually a bad thing at all, and if so, how to fix these issues. By the end of this episode, I will be commissioner of the NBA. Now, damn near everybody is a self-proclaimed NBA ratings expert, so we might as well start there. Front Office Sports released an article about a month into this season that showed NBA ratings were down roughly 28% on ESPN compared to the same period last year, while ratings on TNT remained about the same. And zooming out, it becomes even more obvious that fewer people are watching. NBA Finals TV ratings peaked in 1998, MJ's last finals appearance, which got an average of 29 million viewers. That number sounds especially insane when you consider that last year's finals averaged just over 11 million viewers. But what if I told you that that actually doesn't prove anything when it comes to popularity? I mean, it's certainly a data point that NBA and TV execs alike should pay attention to, but it isn't necessarily an accurate reflection of anything because of how drastically the way we consume media has changed. Do you remember 1998? Were you even alive? To know what happened during an NBA game in 1998, you either had to A, go see it in person, or B, watch it on TV. Otherwise, you saw a recap on SportsCenter, maybe your local news channel, or you read about it in the newspaper. Plus, there were way fewer televised games. There was no league pass where you could watch every game every night if you wanted to. There was no social media where you could get highlights right after they happened without even watching the games. Even the most casual NBA fan had to tune into a game to see what was going on. It reminds me of a similar shift that happened in music in 1998. If I liked a song, I had to listen to it on the radio or I had to go buy a CD. I might have still been buying cassette tapes. I don't even know, but it didn't matter if I liked one song or 5 songs or however many songs. I was going to get every song on the album, and that was that. Now I can go to YouTube, Spotify, Pandora, wherever. I only have to listen to the songs I like if that's all I want to listen to. The last time I purchased an entire album was a decade ago at least. When you compare weekly album sales from 1998 and 2024, it doesn't take long to see there's been a huge drop-off similar to TV ratings. Sure, you certainly have your exceptions in both cases, your Taylor Swifts, your NFLs, but there are so many ways to consume the things we love and so many more things to consume, period, that the metrics we've been using forever are, surprise, surprise, outdated, which makes them a poor measure of popularity. I mean, is music noticeably worse? R&B is, but that's another episode. In general, though, no. You might hear more bad music or music you don't like, but that's because it's so much easier to hear music these days. Which, again, is similar to the NBA. Back when there were only a handful of games on TV a week, you got the best of the best. You didn't suffer through the 11-30 Vancouver Grizzlies versus the 2-36 Denver Nuggets in January of 1998 because David Stern would have cut his head clean off before putting that on TV. It was like it never happened. But now we can all see the Pelicans play the Wizards and how bad that looks just as easily as we can stumble across Dax rapping in character as the Joker. It's just a different environment for all media. So using people sitting down in front of a TV with a Nielsen ratings box, and I don't know anybody who actually has one of those anyways, is a silly way to gauge interest or satisfaction. Not only are lower ratings not a problem, but for you and I, people who are not TV or NBA executives, it shouldn't matter at all. Why are we even talking about it so much? How does it affect our enjoyment if someone else does or doesn't like the thing that we like? The whole thing kind of reminds me of that tweet that was like, Domino's taste all right. We don't have someone in your ear telling you it's nasty. I get that we had to fit in for survival back when we were cave people, but we're not anymore. Like what you like and stop using other people's opinions of it to validate or discredit whether or not that thing is worthy of being liked in the first place. Just enjoy what you enjoy. Like, for instance, Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers, or the blog, The Show Notes, where you can find a weekly sports watch guide where I tell you what you should be watching on TV. Link is below in the show notes. Okay, let's move on to the next prominent talking point, the playing style argument. More specifically, that NBA players shoot too many threes. Now, they certainly shoot more threes than they used to. 20 years ago, the Suns led the league with about 25 three-point attempts per game. Those threes accounted for about 29% of their total field goal attempts. This year, the Celtics lead the league with an absurd 50 attempts per game. Those threes make up 55% of their total field goal attempts. And it's like that from top to bottom. Today, every team averages at least 30 three-point attempts per game. 20 years ago, the Clippers were dead last at just 8.2 attempts per game. That would be tied for 18th amongst individual players this year. So yeah, it's a different game. And look, as a personal preference, I dislike one-dimensional styles of play like this, especially when it's the big men doing it. Embiid, Victor Wembanyama, all these skilled bigs shouldn't be using the three-pointer as their main weapon because it negates their best advantage, which is being big as hell. And while I think there are a lot of three-pointers being shot, I think the nature of the three-point shot itself makes it feel even worse than it is. For starters, unless you're watching the game to break it down for whatever reason, you're most likely only paying attention to the end result of the play, which more often than not is a three-point attempt. You're not noticing that the way these three-point attempts are created varies from team to team based on their offensive system. So there is some diversity in how these threes are created. But why would you watch for that? I don't. Most of the time, I watch basketball just to watch basketball. I'm not trying to take a quiz, but it's important to know that while a three-point attempt is a three-point attempt in the box score, they are different within the context of the actual game. And creating three-point attempts makes everything look worse. Teams are trying to create open threes, obviously, and they're very good at doing that. How does that make things look to you and me? Well, defenses have to travel further to contest, so oftentimes it looks like shooters are wide open, and because a lot of these are catch and shoot opportunities, it makes it look like the defense is lazy and just left some guy wide open. We're used to the players shooting have to create themselves, or at least being contested, since they used to shoot from closer to the hoop, where it was easier to send help defenders. When we don't see that, our minds go straight to lazy ass defense, when really, as is the case with all sports, offensive and defensive skills are better than they've ever been. I mean, name me a sport where the players have gotten worse over time. How do you think tungsten arm O'Doyle would handle facing off against Shohei? He'd poop his pants. It just doesn't happen, but we miss the days when you could easily recognize the degree of difficulty when it came to scoring in basketball, when guys had to dunk over a shot blocker or hit tough fadeaways from the elbow. Or do we? Complaining about playing styles has been around as long as I've watched the NBA. The bad boy Pistons were too physical. Michael Jordan made other players want to dunk too much and not play team ball. Then the Pat Riley Knicks were too physical. Late 90s, early 2000s basketball was too ISO heavy and low scoring. The next generation Pistons with Ben Wallace were too good at defense. The year they won the title, they closed out their Eastern Conference Finals series against the Pacers with a 69-65 victory. Absolutely disgusting. To me, this current era and that era are like the horseshoe theory of basketball eras, where they're so far apart in how they're executed, the offenses were executed, but they're similar in overall effect, and that overall effect is that they aren't especially pleasing to watch. In fact, I think that low scoring era led to this, as there was an overcorrection to help boost scoring, and now the pendulum has swung in the opposite direction. It's tough to find a middle ground because someone figures out the optimal way to play, and then everyone ends up copying it, and this is what you get. There have been brief periods where people weren't completely dissatisfied with the playing styles of the league and wishing for previous eras to return, but the norm for us is to miss the old days. But As Slim Charles so eloquently said, the thing about the old days, they the old days. However, moves were made to get the league out of these playing style ruts before, and I think it's time to do it again. In the past, these rule changes mostly targeted defenses like hand check rules, illegal defense rules, and so on and so forth, but the league has messed around with the three-point line before, so why not do it again? Shooters are so good now that it makes sense to eliminate the corner three where the line is the shortest and move the rest of the line back from 23.9 to maybe 25 feet or so. And not only is there a precedence for this in basketball in the NBA, but in all of sports. Football has tweaked the rules for both gameplay and safety reasons. Baseball has done the same thing, including adding a pitch clock to speed things up after their own little crisis where they were concerned about the popularity of their own sport. If the stuffiest sport we have can break tradition for entertainment purposes, then why can't the NBA? Now, while I don't believe in ratings as an accurate measure of popularity, I'm willing to concede that perhaps the game is less popular, particularly among casual fans, and playing style is only a small factor in that since people have always had various complaints about how the game is played. So what needs to be done to actually address this? To me, the major issues related to the perception of the NBA is a reflection of the issues within the sports media industry. There are not enough voices who are skilled at telling the stories that get people interested in what's going on. And there are a couple of reasons for this. First of all, everyone is waiting for the next face of the league to show up. This happened after MJ retired the second time. Almost all of the league's media eggs are in the LeBron and Steph Curry basket. It's wild as hell that they were still able to put on the show that they did on Christmas, but we're coming to the end of that era and nobody knows what or who is next. Through a combination of personality and play, the face of the league has to leave us in awe. Who does that today besides LeBron or Steph? Especially when you consider we aren't great at embracing foreign players. So that's a strike against a lot of the guys who are somewhat capable on the court, like a Jokic. Will embrace them, but there's a limit. We've never had a face of the NBA who wasn't American. Then you don't have a lot of guys whose public personas are charismatic. They're a little bit underwhelming, no disrespect, like a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who could very well win MVP this season, but he carries himself like ASAP Rocky when Rihanna made him stop embarrassing her, which is fine. Again, being famous sounds miserable at times, but also isn't helping this cause. Or you have the players who do have the larger-than-life personalities, like an Anthony Edwards, but don't quite have the game to match, at least not yet. He was getting MJ comps, but then just the other night, he's complaining about being double-teamed in a very un-MJ-like manner. He's got the physical tools to be a star. How big of a star? I don't know about that, but hasn't quite put it completely together on the court yet. Plus, you get the feeling that the league office is always holding its breath when he speaks into a microphone, which is understandable considering some of the stuff he's said and done in the past, but that kind of takes him out of this whole face of the league thing, for the time being at least. Or you have the guys who have the personality, they have the game, but they have a tragic flaw within their game that turns people off. This is normally something related to effort. They think they're lazy, they flop, combination of both. Think Luka or Joel Embiid. The hope is probably that Wemby can break through and be the first international face of the league, but the Spurs aren't quite important enough in the landscape of the league yet. Maybe one day though. And Zion was probably supposed to fill this void, but he's been too busy filling other voids even when he's healthy. Then on top of this player issue, there isn't a dominant team. I'm a firm believer that nobody actually wants parity. When people say they want parity, what they really want is for their team to have a chance to win it all. In reality, people generally prefer having a team or two that are awesome with everyone else trying to take them down David and Goliath style. Unfortunately, with the way the CBA is set up now, the odds of that happening are much slimmer than previous eras, so we're kind of stuck like this. So the player thing and the team thing make it harder for the sports media voices people care about to tell stories about the NBA. Telling stories is simple. There's a framework. You can just Google it if you really wanted to, but it's not easy, especially if you're trying to do so in a way that gets you those precious clicks that we all have been conditioned to covet. Much simpler and easier to just fire off hot takes and say stuff to get people riled up because clicks are clicks. Angry clicks count just the same as happy ones, and they're easier to get. Off the top of your head, how many voices do you know who talk about the game in a positive manner? I'm not talking about in an ass-kissing way either, where they don't critique obvious mistakes or whatever. That's fine. But is there a balance? I generally like Inside the NBA. It's fun. It's an entertaining studio show, which is why Disney paid good money to have it on ESPN and ABC next season. But it's become less fun the more obvious it is that Shaq, Charles, and Kenny absolutely hate this era of basketball. Which is fine, they're well within their rights to hate it, but I'm not trying to tune into a game to have people shit all over it because they think teams are shooting too many threes and calling it a crappy product. I don't need shameless NBA propaganda, but can I watch it without being hit over the head with the fact that everyone hates it? Compare that to the voiceovers Bob Costas used to do before NBA on NBC games that made every game feel like this mystical event. I'm not saying they can or should do that, but they should consider having Shaq do it because it would be hilarious. In fact, I'll listen to any critiques he or any of the crew has of the game if they do it Costas style. The Inside the NBA guys aren't even the worst offenders of this, but I'm hoping the less I talk about the Skips and Stephen A's of the world, the better society will be. And if it's not the hot take artists telling us that everything stinks, then it's the analytic nerds reducing players to Excel formulas. You know what's awful for storytelling? That. Basketball is art. Players are people. Nobody first picked up a basketball and ran outside to dream of becoming their favorite offensive win share. But these are the two sides who are covering the game for the most part, and these two sides are more similar than they appear. At the core is a desire to prove their intelligence by critiquing things. This is a societal thing now. We can't enjoy anything. Things are not to be enjoyed. Fun will not be had. We must shit on stuff. Basketball, unfortunately, is not immune. Either the game itself is terrible, or you're not as good of a fan as I am because you watch the game without your graphing calculator. And you see all this show up in how the players play. Nobody wants to take risks. They have to protect their legacies from the hot take artists. We can't try hard in the All-Star game, no matter how much bonus money is involved. Dunk contest, go to hell. And then we have to protect our true shooting percentages so the stat nerds love us. Hell yes, I love shooting threes, but a half-court shot at the end of the third quarter, no thank you. Yes, the NBA, like every other league ever, is imperfect. Things need to change, but the biggest problem with it is us. The game is the game. It ebbs and flows and evolves throughout time, just like any other art form. This is how it's always been. We're the ones who are different. This is not me saying not to get jokes off or whatever. D'Angelo Russell has driven me crazy during both of his stints on the Lakers. When I found out he got traded again, I did 4 non-consecutive cartwheels. I'm counting down the days until Thanasis Antetokounmpo returns because I've got plenty to say about him as always. But just like nobody wants to watch a game where teams only shoot threes, I cannot imagine anybody wants to listen to people talk about a game while only shitting on it. And honestly, how could you have watched that Lakers-Warriors Christmas game and not find something about this league enjoyable? Also, while I'm here, I know JJ Redick and Charles Barkley just got into it over this very thing where JJ was critiquing Inside the NBA, sort of the same way I did, just not as eloquently or handsomely, by saying that they shit on the game too much. But I remember JJ being on TV shitting on previous eras. So maybe he should look in the mirror. Now, this has been another episode of Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. Sorry about the hiatus. My grandmother was in the hospital for a couple of weeks. Now she's living with me while continuing to recover. So I didn't have the time or mental energy to do this, but I'm hoping I'm back for good now. Appreciate you being here. My birthday is January 11th. You want to get me a gift? Subscribe if you haven't already, or share this with someone else who will subscribe. I'm trying to make this financially sustainable, and that kind of thing helps a lot. I'm knocking on the door of 300 subs on YouTube. I've got big plans this year, so thank you in advance, and I will catch you next week.